Pack your things and get out, Darren snapped, loud enough to silence every keyboard click and coffee sip in the room. You ever hear a room hollow out? It's not a sound, it's a vacuum. Sucks the air right out of your chest. That's what it felt like when he said it. 17 years in that office, and I got booted like a teenage DoorDash intern who forgot the extra soy sauce. Let me set the scene. Friday, 3:42 p.m., one of those end-of-week alignment meetings Darren insisted on. He liked the word alignment, the same way toddlers like banging pots. Loud, pointless, and somehow always messy. The conference room was packed. Product team, ops, HR, even Greg from facilities, who hasn't aligned with anything since dial-up. Darren's jaw was clenched like he thought he was on Succession, and I was the sacrificial old guard. The crime? A minor client email mix-up. Some quarterly forecast numbers hit the wrong distribution list. Could have been fixed with a 2-sentence reply and a gif of a shrugging cat. But Darren saw an opportunity. And when insecure men with titles see opportunities, they don't solve, they perform. He stood up like he was about to deliver the Gettysburg Address, clicked to a slide with my name in red, real subtle, and started monologuing like a villain with daddy issues, which, to be fair, wasn't far off. Let's talk about accountability, he said, voice thick with smug. We can't afford dead weight, especially not from senior roles. Dead weight. That's what he called me. Then came the line, pack your things and get out. Silence. Then a cough. Then someone's pen rolled off the table, louder than a gunshot. My mouth went dry, but my body, still. I just looked at him, this $20 haircut in a $5,000 suit who married his way into the org chart, and nodded. No words. No protest. No grand scene. Just pushed my chair back, stood up, straightened the collar of my flannel, because unlike Darren, I still did my own laundry, and walked out. Not a single person said anything. Not even Mia, who once called me her work dad. Not even David, who I helped save from a wrongful termination 2 years ago. You learn a lot in those moments, mostly about how quickly people look away when loyalty gets inconvenient. As I walked down that hall, every step was molasses. My ears rang like someone smacked me upside the head with a brass bell. Shock doesn't hit you all at once. It seeps in like a basement flood. By the time I reached my desk, my hands were trembling just enough that I missed the first drawer pull twice. Inside, a photo of my kid holding a cardboard trophy from Take Your Daughter to Work Day, a half-used roll of Tums, and a notebook I'd kept since 2011. I didn't even pack it all. Just grabbed the photo and the notebook. Left the rest. Let them clean up their own mess for once. As I walked toward the elevator, I passed a wall-mounted TV blaring CNBC. Some tech CEO talking about human capital optimization. I laughed out loud. Too loud. Sounded like a man losing his grip or maybe just finding it again. Back in the lobby, the receptionist blinked like she saw a ghost. Everything okay, Mr. Hayes? Yeah, I muttered, pushing through the door. Just got optimized. The autumn air slapped me in the face like it knew something I didn't. I stood on the sidewalk for a second, staring at the glass building I'd bled for. My name wasn't on the front of it, but my fingerprints were in every line of code, every contract clause, every backdoor failsafe I ever installed because I knew Darren types would someday come. You ever hold a fire in your gut so long it forgets how to be anything but quiet? That was me. No yelling. No flaming HR email. Just a strange, sharp calm. Because I knew something Darren didn't. I wasn't walking out empty. I was walking out with every key to the kingdom sewn into my silence. My phone buzzed at 7:06 p.m. that night. First text. Man, that was brutal. I'm so sorry. From Carl in QA. Same guy who once drunkenly told me I was the only reason our testing pipeline didn't implode in 2020. I didn't respond. Didn't even open it. 5 minutes later, Mia. I had no idea he'd do that. I'm sick to my stomach. Still didn't respond. By the time the clock hit midnight, I had 16 unread texts, 3 missed calls, and 1 email from HR with the subject line, "Exit formalities, please read." Polite, clinical, final. They processed everything within hours. Access revoked, badge deactivated, Severance packet PDF'd like a thank you coupon for 17 years of loyalty. There wasn't even a single line acknowledging service. Just line items, dates, checkboxes, and a click to confirm button like I'd canceled a damn magazine subscription. Saturday, I spent most of the day in silence. Not a holy silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that hums, that aches, that makes the refrigerator seem too loud and the dog's breathing feel like an intrusion. My wife kept asking, "Do you want to talk about it?" But I didn't have words. Just this hollowness. Like my chest was one of those abandoned Blockbuster stores. Empty shelves, flickering lights, the ghosts of people who used to give a damn. Meanwhile, word spread. I don't know who started it. Maybe Darren himself. But by Monday morning, the office buzz was that I'd snapped. One version said I refused to own up to a mistake. Another said I stormed out swearing. None of it true. But truth doesn't matter when you leave quietly. Silence becomes a canvas for cowards to paint their guilt onto. Monday lunch, Darren was seen at the taproom near 8th Street, sipping something expensive and laughing way too loud. Dead weight, he apparently told the table of managers. Guy was a dinosaur, smart but no adaptability. We're an agile company now. He toasted to cleaning house. 3 of the people at that table had been on projects I personally resurrected from total collapse. They still clinked glasses, but cracks were already forming. Late Tuesday afternoon, Ben, junior analyst, bright-eyed, always asking questions, knocked on his team lead's office door and asked it plainly, "Wasn't he the guy who set up the client matrix?" The room got quiet. See, the client matrix wasn't just some spreadsheet. It was a custom-built internal structure I'd designed over a decade. Tied together billing, compliance flags, API rate permissions, key contact escalations, hell, even PR risk metrics based on media sentiment. It wasn't in any manual. Wasn't in Confluence. Because Darren didn't believe in documentation. Said it slowed down innovation. Said if systems were built right, they should be intuitive. Like IKEA furniture, I guess, minus the instructions. Ben's question spread like mold under a damp rug. Quiet but growing. Wait, who's maintaining the vendor authentication map? Wasn't he the escalation contact for SEC ops in 3 time zones? Did anyone ever get the new master access tokens after he left? No one had answers. Just more questions. By Wednesday, Mia messaged again. One word this time. Please. I still didn't respond. I wasn't being cruel. I was preserving the integrity of my silence. Words invite spin. Rebuttals invite war. But silence? Silence makes people talk to themselves, and eventually they say things out loud they shouldn't. And Darren? He didn't notice. He was too busy polishing his LinkedIn post. Leadership means knowing when to make tough calls. Restructuring isn't easy, but necessary. 147 likes. Including HR. Including the CTO. Including Greg from facilities. Meanwhile, the building groaned. Systems still worked. Mostly. Emails were still flowing. Projects still moved, kinda. But underneath the floorboards, the termites were feasting. Because I didn't just build systems, I was the systems. And when I left, I didn't slam a door. I just took the hinges with me. The CEO's Tahoe hadn't even cooled in the underground lot before he was upstairs, still wearing his windbreaker from the fishing trip, smelling like trout and bourbon breath mints, barking out demands like the building owed him answers. Monday, 8:11 a.m., and every exec in that glass-paneled hallway felt the air pressure drop. I wasn't there to see it, obviously, but I didn't have to be. I've seen Craig R. Voss angry exactly twice in 17 years. Once when our cloud vendor double-billed us mid-contract, and once when the espresso machine broke during an investor pitch. Neither compared to what I heard he looked like when he walked into the 18th floor boardroom and said, without sitting down, "Someone tell me what the hell happened while I was gone." People talk about tone, about presence. Craig had gravity. You don't interrupt gravity. Darren tried, though. Leaned back like he owned the damn oxygen and said, with his stupid PowerPoint remote still clipped to his belt, "Don't worry, Craig. I handled it." Handled what? Craig's eyes landed on the empty seat I used to fill. The one at the corner, near the window, closest to the server room. Hayes, Darren said with a shrug. He's gone. Pause. Someone coughed. Someone else probably pissed a little. Gone. Craig repeated, lower. He was the kind of guy who got quieter when he got angry, which was somehow worse. Darren spun it like a college kid bluffing through an essay. Look, he was good, but you said we needed to trim inefficiencies. He caused a client miscommunication and blew up at me in front of the team. Totally insubordinate. I made the call. People respect decisiveness. Craig didn't speak, just stared, the way a surgeon might look at a busted scalpel mid-operation. Then, slowly, he leaned against the glass wall and muttered, almost to himself, Jesus Christ, you fired him. Yeah, Darren said, still oblivious. It's done. Craig turned to face the room. Do you even know who you let go? You could probably hear the soul leave Darren's body. He's a systems guy. Darren tried again, voice cracking now. He documented everything, I'm sure. We'll be fine. Craig's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. He didn't document shit, Darren. He was the documentation. A dead silence. Greg from finance slowly closed his laptop like it was a bomb. Without another word, Craig left the room. Walked straight to his office. Slammed the door. Called my cell. First time, 8:34 a.m. Second time, 8:41 a.m. Third time, 8:57 a.m. with a voicemail. I didn't listen to it. Then he tried my personal email. Subject line, need to talk urgently, please. Then my backup email. Then my wife's phone. That one I told her not to answer. I sat in my garage with a mug of burnt diner coffee, watching my dog sleep and the inbox pile up. 32 missed calls by noon. 17 emails. 3 LinkedIn messages. He was that desperate. But I wasn't being petty. I was being precise. See, Craig understood something Darren never would. He knew what I was. Not a title. Not a cog. I was infrastructure. I was the goddamn nervous system of that company. The systems ran through me, vendor relationships, onboarding scripts, the rollback triggers, the API throttling logic built to withstand client-side screw-ups without tanking the whole stack. Darren thought I was a guy with a laptop and a few spreadsheets. Craig knew I was the last dam between them and chaos. By 3 p.m., Darren was panicking. I'm told he kept refreshing Slack, clicking on my old name, hoping I'd pop back up. Maybe he's just cooling off, he said to someone. He'll call back. He always does. Because that's what they believed. That people like me always come back. That we can't not fix things. But I didn't. Because what they didn't realize was that the systems I built, they weren't revenge ready. They were just built by someone who knew this day would come. And Darren? He just pulled the plug. Tuesday morning started with an email from vendor ops. Contract auto-renewal on hold. Awaiting clarification from primary contact. Darren skimmed it, scoffed, and forwarded it to legal with a, take care of this. He didn't even read the attachment. Didn't notice the contract number. Didn't realize it was tied to our third-party cloud billing integrator, the same one that handled 94% of our recurring revenue recognition logic. By noon, 3 more vendors had hit pause. Not canceled, not escalated, just quietly slipped into review. Like a row of dominoes hesitating before they fall. Darren kept saying, it's fine, we'll get someone to call them. Like this was some customer service delay, and not the slow unraveling of every contract I'd personally negotiated under layers of customized handshake clauses, indirect renewals, and conditions only I ever understood fully. Not because I was hoarding power, but because no one ever asked. They let me handle it until suddenly they didn't. Then came the client email. The big one. Subject, payment delay. Q4 pending clarification. From a billion-dollar telecom partner who hadn't missed a payment window since Obama's first term. Pending clarification was corporate speak for we don't trust you anymore. See, I was the face in the room for that contract. Multiple cities, custom API integrations, co-signed onboarding, and a disaster recovery clause so niche even legal didn't know it existed. They wanted me on the call, but I wasn't picking up. Darren's face started twitching during the exec stand-up. Craig, sitting in the corner with his arms folded like a disappointed principal, finally broke the silence. "You look nervous, Darren." "I'm not," Darren lied, eyes darting between legal and the CTO like they were supposed to rescue him. Craig leaned forward. "Good, because if you knew what you'd just undone, you'd be terrified." The CTO, Elena, sharp, skeptical, allergic to corporate bullshit, had her laptop open, half typing, half listening. Then she stopped cold. "Where's the auto failover script?" she asked. Silence. "What script?" Darren blinked. "The client ops rollover for Site B. It was always Hayes' script." "I need the repo." Darren opened his mouth, but legal cut in. "There's nothing in the public repository," she said. "Hayes maintained it privately under SLA exception. No one else had access. Can't we just contact support?" Craig answered flatly, "Support reports to Hayes." Then Elena, voice low, "All the passwords are reset." "Reset." Darren's voice went up an octave. "Admin level creds. Changed. No trail. Not deleted, just inaccessible." "Isn't that illegal?" "No," Elena said, not looking up. "He was admin. Nothing in his exit clause required credential transfers unless formally requested. No transfer, no breach." Craig smirked, humorless. "You fired him before anyone asked for anything. Thought you were cutting fat. Turns out you slashed the veins." Darren's suit was wrinkled now. His tie loosened, one eye twitching like a Morse code signal. His confidence, so thick just days ago, was now paper-thin, barely covering the raw, festering fear underneath. He kept talking, trying to spin it. "We'll rebuild the stack. Get consultants. Rewrite from scratch if we have to." Craig walked over to the floor-to-ceiling windows, looked out at the skyline. "You ever try rebuilding a jet engine at 30,000 feet? Darren didn't answer, because the silence that followed wasn't passive. It was operative. Every system that didn't break, it lagged. Every tool that still worked, it sputtered. Every scheduled script, every cron job, every buried patch I'd quietly added over the years, they were all running on borrowed time, stitched together by logic no one else knew how to read. Not sabotage, just the natural rot that sets in when the builder's gone and the maintenance log is blank. That afternoon, Craig called Darren into his office. No assistants, no notes, just two men, one mistake, and the deafening echo of a company slowly choking on its own arrogance. Craig didn't yell, didn't threaten. He just said one thing before sending Darren out. "You didn't break protocol, Darren. You broke the one man holding it all together. And the worst part? I still hadn't said a word. It started with something small. A nothing migration. Routine. The kind of Friday night job usually done without anyone even noticing. Just a couple back-end servers rerouted to a newer cluster to shave off latency and maybe make Darren look productive in his weekly status reports. Except by Sunday morning, the dashboards lit up like Christmas in hell. Internal clients couldn't authenticate. External APIs failed validation. The core data pipeline, built over a decade of duct tape and quiet genius, froze mid-flow like a stroke victim. Our SLA reporting app showed green, but real-world metrics? Blood red across 5 regions. By Monday, the call queues were jammed. Angry voicemails. Support tickets piling up in hundreds, then thousands. Chatbots spinning in circles like drunk toddlers. What no one realized, what Darren never even asked, was that the dependencies for that migration were never in the company's Git repo. I never put them there. Not because I was hiding anything, but because those tools weren't standard. They were surgical. They were custom fixes for bespoke problems, workarounds for licensing gaps, vendor quirks, load balancing edge cases, client integration spaghetti. They didn't belong in Confluence. They belonged in the one system I trusted, mine. And that system left the building with me. Panic didn't set in all at once. At first, Darren did what all corporate parasites do. He threw money at it. Called in outside consultants. Big names. Cloudbeard. InfraCrest. One guy showed up with a full sleeve tattoo of Kubernetes icons and said, "We'll have you up by Wednesday." By Tuesday afternoon, he was crying in the break room, whispering something about custom logic madness and Kafka deadlocks inside cron wrappers. They couldn't even find the systems I'd built, let alone understand them. Because I didn't leave behind instructions, I left behind instincts. Years of evolution built on what-if scenarios that only mattered when everything else broke. Darren started pulling people into his office, not to ask questions, to blame, to sweat, to push down the blame ladder like it was greased with desperation. Who last saw his documentation? Why didn't anyone mirror the workflows? Didn't anyone back up the dependencies? The answer was always the same. We thought he had it, and I did, until he didn't. Customer success collapsed first. Phones rang off desks. Service-level agreements lit up with breach flags. That telecom client, the one who delayed payment, they terminated the contract outright. Cited lack of operational transparency and continuity. Legal couldn't even argue, because the clause they needed, the little bullet point about system succession, was in my version of the contract. And that version, not in the server, in my notebook, the one I didn't pack when I left. Darren stopped going to the tap room. He stopped wearing suits. He started coming in early, leaving late, eyes bloodshot, hair unwashed. People noticed. Whispers replaced laughter. The same sycophants who toasted his leadership a week ago now muttered things like, "He's unraveling," and "This is above his pay grade." Then came the quiet exits. Ben was the first. Walked into HR on a Thursday morning, resignation in hand. No 2 weeks, no ceremony. "I just don't feel safe here anymore," he told Mia, who had now moved from concerned friend to dead-eyed survivor mode. By Friday, 3 more followed. 2 engineers and a PM. All had worked with me directly. All knew what was coming. Darren tried a town hall. You know the type. Donuts, forced smiles, buzzwords about resilience and teamwork. He stood at the front of the all-hands room, voice cracking like old vinyl, insisting everything was under control. Then someone asked the question, "What happens if another system fails?" He didn't have an answer. He just blinked, swallowed, said, "We have contingencies." But everyone could see it. The bravado was gone. The confidence that once dripped from every smug word was now dried up, leaving only the crust of a man cornered by his own ignorance. And still, I hadn't spoken. I hadn't leaked anything. I hadn't hacked them, sabotaged them, or lifted a finger. All I did was leave. And that was all it took to start the fall. The board found out on a Wednesday, 2 weeks after I was fired, 1 week after the system started bleeding out like a stuck pig in a swimming pool. Not because Darren told them. No, he tried to keep it under wraps. He even went as far as staging a fake system update, alert across internal dashboards to explain the outages, hoping the technical fog would hide the smell of his incompetence. But you can't bury chaos. You can only stall its headline. It was the audit committee that first raised eyebrows. Contracts were stalling. Clients were walking. Monthly recurring revenue projections suddenly dipped 6% in a week. That's not turbulence. That's an airliner losing altitude with the engines on fire. So they summoned Darren. The emergency board call happened on Zoom, 7 a.m. sharp. Everyone bleary-eyed and dead serious. Craig sat in the middle frame, jaw clenched like a pissed-off pit bull, while the rest of the board lined up their questions with the precision of a firing squad. Darren showed up with a jacket over a wrinkled t-shirt and the kind of sweaty desperation you can't steam out. Explain the vendor delays. What happened to the Site B cluster? Why did 3 of our top engineers resign without notice? Where's the continuity documentation for key systems? Darren squirmed, blamed technical legacy debt, mumbled about unexpected gaps in succession planning. And then, when he ran out of buzzwords, he threw the Hail Mary. Well, to be transparent, we suspect Hayes may have engaged in intentional sabotage. You could hear the room inhale. One director actually leaned forward like he misheard. Another rubbed her temples and muttered something under her breath. Craig didn't move, didn't blink, just said, "You're out of your depth." But the accusation was out now, floating like a turd in the pool. Legal had to be looped in immediately. Darren drafted a formal inquiry through the company's legal counsel, citing concerns regarding possible breach of fiduciary duty, destruction of internal documentation, and intentional obstruction of critical system continuity. I saw the PDF. 5 pages of corporate finger-pointing dressed up in concern-trolling legalese. They sent it to me on a Friday. By Monday, my attorney sent back the response. 1 email, 2 lines. All work was conducted under contract. Any accusations should be directed to counsel. That was it. No defense. No explanations. No fireworks. Just the cold, sharp edge of professional silence. Craig saw it for what it was. Checkmate. He refused to co-sign the inquiry. Publicly and privately. Called Darren into his office that afternoon and made it known. I'm not putting my name on a witch hunt because you pulled the pin on a grenade you didn't understand. Inside sources told me Darren looked ready to cry. Not rage, collapse. Like his own brain had finally turned on him. Whispering what everyone else had already figured out. You lost. Not in a bang. Not in a scandal, but in silence. I hadn't leaked a single byte. Hadn't posted a word online. I didn't even tweet. Because I didn't have to. I was insulated. Legally. Technically. Morally. They had no evidence because there was nothing to find. Every hole was a result of their own negligence. Every collapse a tower built without understanding the foundation I had quietly poured for years. But Darren needed someone to blame. He had to. Because if I wasn't the saboteur, then he was just the fool who kicked out the keystone and watched the arch crush him. The board was split. Half smelled blood, the other half smelled lawsuits. And that smell, corporate liability, is stronger than fear or ego or even money. It brings panic. And panic? That's when the sharks show up. Darren started skipping meetings. Stopped replying to emails unless someone CC'd Craig. Started drinking whiskey out of a hydro flask during his one-on-ones. People noticed. One exec said he looked like a man trying to lie in Morse code. And me? I was playing chess with my daughter on a Tuesday afternoon. She beat me. And when she did, she asked, "Are you going to be mad?" I laughed and said, "No, kid. I'm just glad I didn't waste my queen too early." Darren had wasted his. And now the board was sharpening their knives. The file hit TechPulse at 6:13 a.m. on a Monday. Not a news cycle time. Not a press release. A leak. Dropped like a pipe bomb wrapped in a PDF. Sitting right at the top of their front page under the headline. Exclusive. Internal memos suggest executive pressured HR to cut costs via severance fraud. Inside the article, screenshots, time-stamped messages, an internal Slack thread where Darren suggested HR quietly backdate exit paperwork to avoid triggering full severance packages. My name among them. In one message, he wrote, "We can avoid the payout if it's tagged as voluntary or a preemptive restructure. No one's gonna fight it. He's too old school for lawsuits." He was right about one thing. I wasn't going to sue. I had something better. Within minutes, the link was bouncing around internal group chats, investor forums, and a niche subreddit called r/corporate casket, where the post "How Not to Fire Your Infrastructure Wizard" hit the top with 4,000 upvotes in under 2 hours. Someone uploaded a redacted version of my exit documents, complete with Darren's e-signature and the HR revision timestamp. It was surgical, intentional, and loud. No one ever confirmed the source, but the article cited multiple former employees with direct knowledge. Ben, Mia, maybe even Elena. The dominoes had names now, and they weren't afraid anymore. Someone even posted a photo of the 4th-floor server room with a caption, "The place Hayes built, still held together by hope and undocumented bash scripts." Then came the Glassdoor reviews. 1-star bombs dropped like napalm. "You're disposable here, unless you marry someone. We lost our best people because the COO wanted a power trip. Hayes held this place together. They tossed him like a printer manual. Clients noticed. 3 major accounts paused contracts pending internal stabilization. That's Fortune 500 language for 'we don't trust your leadership anymore.' A logistics client who'd been with the company since 2009 called directly and said, 'We're migrating. No hard feelings, but we need grown-ups running this thing.' The stock dipped 11% by Friday. And Darren? He snapped. Witnesses say it happened during a Thursday review call with Craig and two board members. Darren, face like raw hamburger, slammed both fists onto the table and shouted, "Why isn't he doing anything? Why the hell won't he stop this?" Craig didn't flinch, didn't even look up from his notebook. Just said, flat and low, "He already did. You just didn't see it." Silence, except for Darren's breathing. Heavy, frantic, small, because that was the moment it clicked. All the little things. The expired vendor logins, the broken API failovers, the passwords that couldn't be reset, the contracts stuck in pending, the resignation wave, the quiet consultants who came and left looking haunted. It wasn't chaos. It was architecture. I hadn't retaliated. I hadn't raised my voice, posted a blog, or written a tell-all. I just walked out and let the truth do laps around Darren's lies. Now he was pacing, sweating through his shirt, calling emergency PR firms and threatening legal with lawsuits that made no sense. People stopped avoiding him. They started watching him like a cracked window, waiting for the collapse. And it came. Quietly, HR stopped replying to his emails. Elena requested to report directly to Craig until further notice. And someone from finance started digging into discretionary spending approvals because guess what? Darren had also expensed a $4,000 team dinner that never happened. He had no allies left, no cover, no runway, just noise. And I was at a hardware store, buying a sledgehammer for no reason other than it felt good to hold. When the article about the severance scandal hit my inbox, I didn't open it. I just smiled, because I didn't leak it, but I knew someone would. The emergency board meeting was held on a Sunday, unheard of unless the company's on fire. And in this case, the entire fourth quarter was already ashes. No catered breakfast, no polo shirts or awkward jokes about weekend warriors. Just 11 very tired, very rich people all wondering how the hell they'd let a glorified nepotism hire tank a perfectly good tech firm in under 3 weeks. Craig didn't bring a slideshow. He didn't need one. Instead, he walked into the room with a leather-bound folder, placed it on the table and said, "Let me walk you through 17 years of competence and 17 days of carnage." He began at the start. 2006. Hayes joins as a mid-level systems analyst. Quiet, precise, builds a vendor credential system that saves the company over $400,000 in fraud mitigation. 2010. Writes the architecture for the client matrix that later underpins 70% of enterprise operations. 2013. Leads the security redesign after the data breach, while on paternity leave. 2016. Negotiates a vendor clause that accidentally future-proofs the entire cloud infrastructure for GDPR. 2020. Rebuilds the API integration layer single-handedly during COVID furloughs when the entire offshore team went dark. He listed dates, names, deliverables. Every page in that folder was a quiet bullet of proof that I had not only carried the company, but done it without ever asking for more than a working coffee machine and a badge that didn't demagnetize every Friday. Then Craig flipped to the last page. March 8, 2025. Darren fires Hayes over a client email error. He looked around the table. The error was Darren's. Silence. Then he passed out copies of the leaked memo. The pressure on HR. The falsified severance suggestions. The misused discretionary spending. One board member asked, "What's our exposure if he sues?" Craig didn't hesitate. He won't. That's not his style. But our exposure is existential if we keep pretending this clown show can continue. Darren, seated 3 spots down, tried to speak. "I made a call with the information I had." Craig cut him off. "You made a call to swing your dick around in a room full of people you didn't understand. And now the company bleeds money because you fired the guy who built the pipes." Darren was forced to resign that afternoon. The letter was short. Effective immediately. No farewell email. No speech. Just a box packed in silence and a driver who waited downstairs without making eye contact. He went home to a half-empty house. His wife, Craig's daughter, had already filed for separation. Quietly, through her attorney, citing irreconcilable public humiliation. "I didn't throw a party. didn't gloat, didn't tweet a cryptic quote from Sun Tzu or post a smug LinkedIn update with hashtags like hashtag quiet revenge or hashtag leadership lessons. I just opened an LLC. No website, no logo, just a name on a plain Delaware registry and a signal to the people who mattered. I was available. Within days, the calls came. 3 of the clients who bailed on Darren's company called me directly. No fluff, no negotiations. Just, whatever you're charging, we'll pay it. We just want something that works, and someone who gives a damn. I didn't even set up a formal office. Just a second-hand desk, a good chair, and a whiteboard in my garage next to the beer fridge. And in that piece, I found something better than revenge. Relevance without obligation. Darren had spent his whole career trying to be seen. I'd spent mine quietly being essential. And when it came time to choose between the two, the world picked function over flash. So I sipped my coffee, cracked open a terminal window, and started building. Not because I had something to prove, but because I finally didn't have to prove anything to them again. 3 months passed. Enough time for the headlines to fade, for the subreddit threads to grow cold, for the Slack channels to be repopulated by new hires who didn't know Darren's name and wouldn't ask. The stock had started to crawl back, thanks to Craig stepping in personally. The internal systems were mostly patched, mostly stable, but there was always a glitch, a corner no one could reach, a logic tree that didn't quite branch the way they expected. My fingerprints, still faintly visible in the code, like echoes in a haunted house. Then, on a Thursday morning in May, an email arrived. From Craig. No subject line, just a plain message, plain as ever. Hayes, I owe you an apology. And thanks. You were never just IT. You were the spine. I was too late seeing it. That's on me. See. I stared at the screen for a while. Let it sit there, like an unopened letter from a father who finally admits he was wrong after the funeral's over. No bitterness. No triumph. Just time. I didn't reply, not with words. Instead, I opened a new invoice template. I filled in my name, my LLC's info. Billed to Craig's company. Description: back-channel system support, legacy transition assistance, silent continuity. Amount: $0. At the bottom, in the notes field, I typed just one line. Consider it a favor. Once. Then I hit send. No follow-up. No attachments. No digital signature. I didn't even check to see if it was opened, because the message wasn't for accounting. It was for him. A few weeks later, I heard through a mutual connection that Darren was back in town. Not in a boardroom, not in tech. He was managing a franchise gym 2 counties over. Had lost weight, grew a beard, still wore the same watch, though. Someone saw him in the parking lot, sitting in his car long after closing. Not crying, just sitting, like a man rewinding every decision he ever made and coming up empty. Another contact told me Darren came back to headquarters once. Had to retrieve some old files, clear his laptop. No fanfare, no welcome, just the security guard nodding at him like he was a former substitute teacher nobody liked. He walked out carrying a single cardboard box. Same brand I used to ship servers in. Inside, a few pens, some notebooks, a travel mug, and a mousepad with "Move Fast, Fix Things" printed in faded white. They say as he stepped into the elevator, he stopped for just a second, looked around at the walls, at the people who didn't look back. The same phrase played in his head, looping like a curse. Pack your things and get out. He never spoke it aloud, but he didn't have to, because it wasn't my voice anymore. It was his. That's the thing about revenge. It doesn't need fire to scorch, doesn't need fury to ruin. Sometimes all it takes is a man calmly walking away while the fool lights his own match. And in the end, I didn't burn the bridge. I just let Darren build it, strut across it, and watch it crumble beneath his own 2 feet. No sound, no smoke, just silence and dust.